It is December 25th, 1743. The streets of London are loud. People are feasting. Alcohol is flowing. The taverns are packed. To the average person, this looks like a celebration. But to John Wesley, the man who rode 250,000 miles to save the soul of England, this didn't look like a party. It looked like a crime scene. Wesley looked at the festivities, and he didn't see joy. He saw a supreme insult. He famously asked, "Is it not a mockery to celebrate the birth of a holy God with unholy actions?" He realized that the most dangerous day of the year wasn't Halloween. It was Christmas, because it is the one day where the world pretends to love Jesus, while actually loving their own pleasure. Wesley didn't want to cancel Christmas. He wanted to reconquer it. He wanted to take it back from the drunks and give it back to the king. But his message wasn't just for the 18th century. It is a terrifying mirror for us today. If John Wesley walked into your house this December 25th, would he see a birthday party for a king? Or would he see a celebration where the guest of honor was left outside the door? This is the story of how one man fought to keep the Christ in Christmas, and why his warning is more urgent now than ever before. Welcome back to the channel. We are entering the most famous season of the year. The lights are up. The trees are decorated. The carols are playing in the shopping malls. It is the season of joy to the world. But if we are honest, for many people, Christmas has nothing to do with Jesus. It has become a festival of consumerism, gluttony, and stress. We spend money we don't have, to buy gifts people don't need, to impress people we don't even like. And somewhere in the middle of the wrapping paper and the wine, the birthday boy is forgotten. John Wesley saw this coming 300 years ago. He looked at the way England celebrated Christmas, the drinking, the partying, the excess, and he was horrified. He didn't see a celebration, he saw a contradiction. He asked a question that still haunts the church today. How can you claim to worship the light of the world while acting like you belong to the darkness? Wesley didn't want to cancel Christmas. He wanted to redeem it. He wanted to take the energy of the season and channel it into prayer, charity, and true worship. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We are looking at history through the eyes of the generals. Pause the video right now and leave a comment below. Jesus is the center. Today we are going to look at how John Wesley navigated the holiday spirit without losing the Holy Spirit. We will see how he dealt with a culture that treated Christmas like a frat party. And we will find out why the Methodists decided to start their own tradition. A tradition that saved thousands of souls while everyone else was sleeping off a hangover. It's time to separate the turkey from the truth. Let's go to 18th century England. To understand Wesley's anger, you have to understand the era. In 18th century England, Christmas was not Silent Night. It was a riot. For centuries, the 12 days of Christmas, from December 25th to January 6th, was a time of license. The factories closed, the fields were frozen, and the people were bored. It was a season of misrule. The poor would demand alcohol from the rich. Men would gamble away their wages. The taverns would stay open all night. It wasn't a birthday party for Jesus. It was Mardi Gras with snow. John Wesley walked through these streets. He saw men stumbling out of pubs, vomiting in the gutters, shouting blasphemies, all while wearing Christmas colors. He saw families spending a month's wages on a single feast only to starve in January. He wrote in his journal with a mixture of sadness and fury. He couldn't understand the logic. He asked, "Do we celebrate the birth of the Holy One by acting like beasts?" To Wesley, who accounted for every single penny and every single minute of his day, this was insanity. He realized that the devil had pulled off a masterstroke. Satan hadn't destroyed Christmas. He had hijacked it. He had turned a day meant to honor the Savior into the number one day for sinning against him. Wesley preached, "It is not a sin to eat. It is not a sin to drink, but it is a sin to make your belly your God." He saw that the people were using the grace of God as a license for immorality. They thought, "It's Christmas. God has to forgive us today." Wesley knew he had to do something drastic. He couldn't just tell them to stop. You cannot remove a bad habit without replacing it with a good one. He couldn't just cancel the party. He had to throw a better party. He looked at the calendar. He looked at the long, dark nights of December, and he came up with a plan to counter the darkness. He decided to open the church doors when everyone else was opening the wine bottles. He was about to invent a new tradition, one that didn't involve food, but involved fire. Wesley knew a fundamental truth about human nature. You cannot fight a song with silence. The taverns were full of music. The drunks were singing loud, rowdy, catchy songs about drinking and women. If Wesley wanted to win the streets, He needed a sound that was louder, catchier, and more powerful than the songs of the world. He didn't have a Spotify playlist, but he had a secret weapon, his brother, Charles Wesley. Charles was the poet of the movement. While John was the general organizing the troops, Charles was the bard writing the battle anthems. Wesley told his people, "We are not going to sit quietly in the pews. We are going to sing our theology." In 1739, Charles picked up his pen and wrote a hymn that would become the most famous Christmas song in the English language. Originally, he titled it, "Hark, How All the Welkin Rings," later changed by George Whitefield to the version we know today. We know it as, "Hark, the herald angels sing." But this wasn't just a pretty carol to sing by the fire. It was a theological manifesto. Look at the lyrics. "Born that man no more may die, born to raise the sons of earth, born to give them second birth." While the drunks in the pub were singing about forgetting their problems, the Methodists were singing about the solution to death itself. Wesley instituted a radical schedule for Christmas Day. Most people slept in on Christmas morning, nursing a headache from Christmas Eve. But Wesley ordered his soldiers to rise at 4 a.m. Imagine that, walking through the freezing, snow-covered streets of London in the pitch black, hours before the sun came up. The only people awake were the Methodists and the die-hard drunks stumbling home. They would gather in the chilly preaching houses, often with no heat, and they would sing at the top of their lungs. They were declaring, "We are not slaves to comfort. We are not slaves to the bottle. We are servants of the King." This early morning service became a badge of honor. It was a way of saying to the world, "You celebrate with excess. We celebrate with sacrifice." The Great Awakening wasn't just about preaching. It was about singing. The miners, the factory workers, and the poor, who had been told they were worthless, suddenly found themselves singing songs that called them sons of God. Wesley had successfully replaced the spirit of the age with the Holy Spirit, but he wasn't done. He knew that singing was good, but it wasn't enough to keep a man sober. He needed a contract. He needed a binding agreement that would survive past December 25th. He was about to introduce the covenant service. If Christmas Day was a battle, New Year's Eve was a war zone. In England, the end of the year was a time of superstition and wild partying. People believed that how you spent the stroke of midnight determined your luck for the next year, so naturally they spent it drunk. Wesley looked at this tradition and saw a massive wasted opportunity. He saw millions of people awake at midnight, but for all the wrong reasons. So he introduced a concept that was radical for the 18th century, but is common in churches today: the watch night service. While the rest of London was heading to the pubs to toast the new year, the Methodists were heading to the chapel. They didn't have a band. They didn't have confetti. They didn't have champagne. They had silence. Wesley would gather the people, sometimes thousands of them, and they would pray as the clock ticked down. The atmosphere was heavy. It was serious. Wesley taught them that the end of a year wasn't a time to forget. It was a time to audit. He would ask them, "You have lived another 365 days. How many of them were for God? And how many were for yourself?" As the clock struck midnight, they didn't shout, "Happy New Year." They fell to their knees, and they prayed the most dangerous prayer ever written. It is known as the covenant prayer. Most prayers today are about asking God for things. God, give me a job. God, give me a spouse. God, bless me. But the covenant prayer was the opposite. It was a blank check signed over to God. Listen to the words they recited in the silence of the night. "I am no longer my own but thine. Put me to what thou wilt. Rank me with whom thou wilt. Put me to doing. Put me to suffering. Let me be employed for thee, or laid aside for thee, exalted for thee, or brought low for thee. Let me be full. Let me be empty. I freely and heartily yield all things to thy pleasure and disposal." Read that again. Put me to suffering. Let me be empty. Who prays that? Only a person who understands the true meaning of the Incarnation. Wesley was teaching them that Christmas means God gave his all for us, so the only logical response is to give our all back to him. This service broke the cycle of sin. Instead of starting January 1st with a hangover and regret, the Methodists started it with a clean slate and a total surrender. The watch night became so powerful that it spread to the black church in America, where it took on a new meaning on December 31st, 1862, Freedom's Eve, waiting for the Emancipation Proclamation. But for Wesley, it started as a way to keep his people safe from the toxic culture of the holiday season. He built a fortress of prayer in the middle of a city of chaos. But Wesley knew that prayer inside the church was easy. The real test was what happened when you walked outside, into the cold, hard reality of the streets. Because while the rich were feasting, the poor were freezing, and Wesley was about to ruin Christmas dinner for every wealthy person in England. John Wesley was a small man, only 5'3", but he had the courage of a lion, and he had a habit of making people uncomfortable, especially rich people. To Wesley, the Incarnation, God becoming flesh, wasn't just a theological idea. It was a social mandate. If God became poor to save us, how dare we remain rich and ignore the poor? In the winter of 1760, England was hit by a severe frost. The Thames River froze over. The price of bread skyrocketed. While the aristocracy was eating goose and drinking imported wine, the widows and orphans in the Methodist societies were literally starving to death. Wesley couldn't enjoy his dinner. He famously said, "I cannot eat my morsel alone while my brother has none." He launched a campaign that shamed the religious establishment. He didn't just ask for donations, he demanded sacrifice. He walked the streets of London in the snow, knocking on doors. He collected clothes, blankets, and bread. He turned the Foundry, his headquarters in London, into a relief center. He set up a medical dispensary, the first free clinic for the poor in London, where he gave out medicine to those who couldn't afford a doctor. But he went further. He looked at his own lifestyle. Wesley made a significant income from the sales of his books and pamphlets. He could have been a millionaire in today's money, but he set a cap on his lifestyle. He lived on £28 a year. If he made £30, he gave away 2. If he made £100, he gave away 72. He told his followers, "If I leave behind me £10, when I die, you and all mankind bear witness against me that I lived and died a thief and a robber." Think about that definition of a thief. To Wesley, keeping more than you needed while someone else was dying was theft. This was his Christmas spirit. It wasn't about giving a token gift. It was about radical redistribution. He challenged the wealthy Christians. You say you love God? Prove it. Look at the beggar in the snow. That is Jesus in disguise. If you walk past him to get to your church service, your service is an abomination. Wesley made Christmas uncomfortable. He forced people to look at their bank accounts. He forced them to look at their wardrobes. He famously said, "The money you spent on that gown could have clothed 3 naked children." He wasn't trying to be mean. He was trying to save them from the idolatry of comfort. He knew that stuff suffocates the soul, and because of his relentless pressure, the Methodist movement became the greatest force for social welfare in England. They didn't wait for the government to help. They became the help. But Wesley was getting old. He had fought the drunks. He had fought the rich. He had fought the cold. Now he was facing the end of his own life, and his final Christmas would be a testimony to everything he preached. By 1790, John Wesley was 87 years old. Most men of his age were sitting by the fire, recounting old war stories. Wesley was still at war. He was nearly blind. His hands shook so much he could barely write. His clothes were threadbare, but he was still waking up at 4 a.m. He was still preaching. He was still riding his horse through the rain and snow to reach the forgotten villages of England. The tax collectors couldn't believe it. They assumed that the leader of a massive movement like Methodism, with tens of thousands of followers, must be hiding a fortune. The commissioners of excise sent him a letter, demanding an inventory of his silver plate, silverware, expecting him to list piles of luxury items. Wesley wrote back a letter that is legendary for its sarcasm and its honesty. He replied, "I have 2 silver spoons at London, and 2 at Bristol. This is all the plate I have at present, and I shall not buy any more, while so many around me want bread." He kept his promise. He had made millions of pounds in today's money over his lifetime, and he had given every single penny of it away. In March 1791, the general finally laid down his sword. He collapsed in his small room in London. He was surrounded by his friends and the few family members he had left. As he lay dying, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't worried about his legacy. He had spent 50 years fighting to put Christ back into the center of England's life. He had fought the whiskey, the greed, and the apathy. In his final moments, he gathered his remaining strength. He lifted his hand one last time and whispered the secret of his life. He didn't say, "I built a great church." He didn't say, "Look at my books." He said, "The best of all is, God is with us." Think about that. God is with us. That is the definition of Emmanuel. That is the definition of Christmas. The man who spent his life fighting against a Christmas without Christ died with the assurance that Christ was right there in the room with him. He died on March 2, 1791. When they opened his will, they found almost nothing. He left his clothes to be shared among the poor preachers. He left the coins in his pockets to the men who carried his coffin. And he left instructions that he wanted no pomp, no expensive funeral, and no hearse. He wanted 6 poor men to carry him to the grave, and he wanted them to be paid 20 shillings each, so that even his death would be a blessing to the poor. John Wesley died as he lived, empty of self and full of God. He left behind a nation that was less drunk, more honest, and deeply aware of God. He saved England from a bloody revolution, like the one in France, simply by changing the human heart. So here we are in the 21st century. We are about to celebrate Christmas again. The stores are full. The Amazon packages are piling up. The liquor stores are stocking up. The world is still trying to have a party without the guest of honor. John Wesley's life is a mirror. It asks us a hard question. Is your Christmas about consumption, or is it about covenant? Are you going to spend this season filling your life with things that will rust and fade, or are you going to empty yourself for the sake of others? We don't need to wake up at 4 a.m. in the snow, unless you want to, but we do need to wake up spiritually. We need to reclaim the day. If you want to bring the focus back to Jesus this year, I have a challenge for you. On Christmas morning, before you open a single gift, read the covenant prayer. Give yourself back to God before you accept anything from the world. Comment below, God is with us. And now, we have talked about the generals who fought for the truth, but there is one story left. The story that makes all of this possible. We have talked about Wesley, Edwards, and the revivalists, but none of them would have had a message to preach if it wasn't for one man. The man who was the spy. The man who was the smuggler. The man who was burned alive so that John Wesley could open a Bible in English.